Hi everyone, just to introduce this creative panel. So I'm Emily from a company called Radley Yeldar, and we are an integrated creative agency. So we help businesses and governments talk to all sorts of audiences, whether that's employees or investors or customers. And we do that across all sorts of different types of disciplines. So through design, we do it through digital, through film, and through just about any medium that you could think of. So what we've done today is pull together a panel of people from different parts of our business who can talk to you about different types of jobs that are available within our creative industry. So without further ado, I'm probably going to hand off to the panel to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their role and what they do day to day, and also how they got into things in the first place. So if we could start with Steph, please.
Hi, I'm Steph. I'm a designer at RY, and I mainly work in the investor relations team. So we work with a lot of businesses and help them communicate to a lot of their investors about what they're doing. We work kind of really broad in terms of they'll talk about their business, but they'll also talk about how they're helping the world and sustainability. And I think it's quite a, if you look at it from the outset, it's something that most people probably wouldn't think of being a very creative or design-based sector, but because it's so communication heavy, it's a real task in how to kind of take all that information, which sometimes can be pages and pages and pages, and just simplify it completely down to make it really understandable and easy to digest, really. We work across various platforms into like digital, so a lot of online sites that you'll see that kind of do the same thing. It's about taking that information and rather than overloading people, how to break it down and make it easy, really. And I think that's the key bit about being creative. It's just telling that story and getting a message across. How did I get into being a designer at RY? First of all, I didn't really want to be a graphic designer. I wanted to be an architect, but I couldn't hack the physics and the math side of it. It was just too much for me, and I wanted to get involved with all the kind of ideas and putting pen to paper rather than the technicalities behind it. So I think it was my mum actually was like, do you know what a graphic designer is? I think I was in year 10 and I'd kind of heard about it and I was like, no. And I went and did a work placement. It was up in Leeds, actually. It was really far away from where I lived. And I loved it. They worked for a lot of train companies and they did like a lot of their advertising and their like marketing collateral. And I just was like, yeah, this is for me. And I decided from there, I did my A-levels. I did art. This is where I should remember the other ones that I did. I think I did IT and English. And then I went off to Sheffield, Hallam, and did 4 years at uni. And then I took the internship at RY, and I've never really left, which has been great. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Thank you. Bea, do you want to introduce yourself and your role and a little bit about how you got into it?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi everyone, I'm Bea and I'm a project manager at RY. And as you might hear from my accent, I'm actually from Austria, a really tiny village with only 14 houses. So I'm really from the countryside, to say the least. And what I do at RY, project management, I think is maybe what you can imagine the easiest, because it's kind of just making sure everything is processing as it should. And I always like to say it's kind of the glue that holds everything together. So it's really working with every team member within RY and also the client to ensure we're delivering against the brief, so giving them what they really want, and also making sure it's against their timescales and on budget. And how I got there, I mean, personally, I'm a really organized person, so it's not really that much of a surprise. But as I already said, I'm from a really tiny village. And when I was around 13, 14, there wasn't really much around in my area. Kind of, you know, we had a handful of schools. So I went with what was already in my family. So my brother was doing something in IT, and I thought, oh, well, why not? So I went to a technical college, which is kind of, I think, the equivalent to the A levels. So I focused on the technical subjects, and I realized only after, well, less than a year that really this isn't for me. I was struggling to understand, you know, how the abstract coding and programming would transform into something really useful for people. But I was really lucky that I had one teacher who taught something about marketing. So one subject out of, I don't know, a lot. And I really realized I'm interested and I love to learn about it more. And that's how I kind of stumbled into it. And after I finished those 5 years of technical bits, I went on to study something about communications and marketing. And this is the first time I really realized that learning can be fun if you're interested, and, you know, it's actually a joy to learn. And that's how I ended up there. So can tell you a little bit more later on about kind of the specific bits we did there, but that's a good glimpse, I guess.
Thank you. Hayley, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your role and how you kind of fell into it?
Hi guys, my name's Hayley. I'm a production assistant at RY, so that's part of the film team, the film and animation team. I've been part of the team for a year now, and before that, like how I got into the team, I was the receptionist at RY for over a year and decided that I needed to do something a little bit more creative, sort of try and find a path for me that wasn't necessarily staying on the reception desk. And I was lucky to find a role within the film team. I've really enjoyed it. So as a team, we produce a lot of films for our clients, whether that's a lot of brand films or internal comms. We do a load of animations for our clients. And I just assist the producers and the other team members on sort of anything they need help with, a lot of admin side of it, but also so I can sort of be a bit more creative and come up with these briefs and proposals for our clients to make sure that what they want to portray in the films comes across.
Thank you. Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself and your role and a little bit about how you got into it?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Kelly and I'm currently working at RY as the workflow manager, and that is specifically within the creative team. So I work really closely with the creatives to make sure that they've got the work that they're planned in to be working on. I work really closely with the project managers as well to make sure that they've got the resource that they need for all the projects that they have planned in. On a weekly basis, I have resource meetings with the creatives to make sure that everything is going swimmingly, and see what work is planned for the following week and make sure that the time is there that they need. And also working, like I said earlier, on a close basis with the project managers to make sure that they have the time that they need for the following week. And yes, it's a constant sort of conversation with various people in the business to make sure things are running smoothly. There's often lots of last minute requests as things come in from clients, and things change constantly and evolve. So we're often moving lots of different parts around in our system, our internal system called Workbook, and making sure that there is time in there and changing time and finding new people to do things, and often getting freelancers in as well to work on last minute requests or pieces of work that we don't internally have people to work on. Like Bea, I've always been a really sort of organised person and want to make sure things are running smoothly. I guess the person in the background, making sure things are running smoothly. And I guess I sort of got my role because I worked as a studio manager in my last agency, and that was very much managing lots of different things, and I wanted something that was a bit more focused and specifically around people. So that's kind of how I am doing now. But I went to college, went to uni. I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I always thought maybe a producer, project manager, and that's where I am now.
Thank you very much for that. Karina, perhaps you can introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and how you found yourself here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Karina. Similar to Bea, I'm not from the UK. I'm from the States originally. And I made my way to RY only 4 months ago. So I'm still quite fresh, but I'm part of the consultancy team. And specifically, I'm within our sustainability offering. So what that really means for us is that we are the group, consultancy speaking, that is trying to understand the problems our clients are facing and trying to help them solve them. So in sustainability, what, for instance, I do on a daily basis is I try and understand what are the key areas that companies can be focusing on in order to either reduce their negative impacts or to enhance their positive impacts on the environment and society. I love that part of our work. It's challenging, but it's also very inspiring. And we really feel like we're making a difference in the world, which is great. I don't have a creative background at all. In fact, I have quite the opposite. My background is in law. So I went to university in the States and I studied human rights, and then I went on to law school in the States. I practiced as a lawyer for a couple of years. And I'm sure we'll get into this a bit later, but what I will say is that there are always transitional skills, and you'll hear that from every one of these women here today. No matter where you start, there's something that you can use as building blocks along your journey. So I look forward to speaking to you. Thanks.
Thank you. And Megan, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hey everyone, so I'm Meg and I am a digital designer at RY. I've been at RY now for sort of near enough 3 years, and this has been my first job straight out of university. So I came in RY on an internship. Prior to that, I'd done 2 other internships that were kind of around the month or 2 month line, and generally it's quite hard to build up that, you know, those blocks of experience to get taken on for a junior role. But RY offered like a 6-month internship, so I got the internship here. It built me up to that level to then get offered a junior role at the agency. And the area in which I was offered a role was within the digital team. So actually digital design was something I'd never done before. I studied graphic design at university, so I mainly focused on that and sort of typography and brand and print work. It wasn't until I came to RY that I got introduced to digital design, and more specifically just working on websites, and absolutely fell in love with it. So when they offered me the role in that team, I was really delighted, and it's what I've done since. So sort of, yeah.
Thank you. And lastly, we've actually just had a question through from our attendees, which I'll come to just in a moment after Jess has introduced herself, and then I'll throw that to the panel. So, Jess, perhaps you could tell us a little bit.
Hi, my name is Jess. I'm also on the film team with Hayley, but I was having some technical issues, so I'm sorry if Hayley, you already mentioned some stuff and I'm repeating it. So I'm the production manager, which has a lot of kind of separate parts to it. So it's sort of part supporting the producers on the team with like the films and pre-production and shoot prep. It's also helping manage internal operations, which also kind of covers like resourcing. So we have an internal animation team, and I handle all the resourcing for them, booking in any jobs that they're working on, sort of supervising that their tasks get covered and stuff like that. And then very occasionally I get to work as like a junior producer on projects, which is really fun. And sometimes like Hayley and I get to go on shoots as well, so that's a really good experience. I sort of stumbled into this role almost accidentally, I guess. So I didn't study film or anything like that. I actually did English literature at university, and I just did that because I liked the subject at school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do sort of post that or what kind of career I wanted to pursue. So I think I just kind of had in my head, what do I like doing? What are my interests? And film was definitely one of them. So even though like my career before that was mainly sort of service industry jobs, you know, like waitressing, bartending, working in a shop, I was always trying to find ways within those roles to complement what my interests were, so writing about films and stuff like that. And then I had a job as a secretary, and then I was just desperately looking for anything in film, or I also like video games, so anything that I could move into that industry. And then this job luckily gave me a interview, and I sort of realised that a lot of the skills that I had from my previous jobs, even if they didn't seem super relevant, were actually really relevant, more so than any kind of education that I'd been through, like from my degree, anything like that. So yeah, it works out really well.
Thank you very much for that, Jess. So I'm going to just start with the first question that came through, which I think I'm going to ask Steph and Meg to talk about first. So the first question that came through is it best to go to university or art school, or can you become a designer straight from school? Steph, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Muted.
Just need to unmute, Steph.
Sorry. You definitely don't have to go to university or art school or anything like that to become a designer. I think being a designer isn't about what you learn, it's about what you can do and how you can challenge yourself and take something that someone can almost visualize in their mind, or they know what they want, and basically pull it all together. And it's about talking to so many different people, be it the consultants or the project managers, and all feeding off one another. I think what you can gain from going to university or to arts college is it really gives you the chance to think outside the box. I think one thing that I've definitely learned from, I did 4 years at uni and 4 years now at RY, is no one has ever asked me what I got in my degree or what my degree was in, because when you kind of interview for arts roles, it's not about where you've been, what you've done, who you are, it's about what you can do. And obviously in a creative role, you will kind of go to any interview with a portfolio, and you don't have to say where you did that work. You could have done that work at home, or it might not even have been a live brief, but you might have had this great idea and like fleshed it through, and that doesn't matter. I think as long as you can show that you're capable, you don't need to stop yourself from doing it just because you don't have a degree. And I think the main difference in what I kind of did at uni, and a plus point for me, was that it wasn't just about the creative briefs, and it wasn't just about kind of getting to the right answer. It was the fact there was no right answer. I think at uni you don't really have anyone to answer to. Like, you don't necessarily, all your briefs aren't going to be like live client briefs. It could just be a very open-ended thing, and you can really let your mind go wide. And if it's not possible, it's not possible, but you've kind of explored it. Whereas when you kind of come into the real world of work, that might not always be an option because there's budgets, or, I mean, sometimes you get a great clients that kind of let you run wild and you can come up with the most amazing thing. But I think that's one thing I would say. I think if you're going to go down the apprenticeship route, for example, just allow yourself to keep that creative spark going outside of work, and don't just focus everything you do to your live client briefs if they don't let you be creative. If you're feeling restricted in any way, shape or form, just kind of go with it. I think that kind of answers the question, and if it didn't, I'm really sorry, but a basic answer is no, you don't have to do that.
Thank you. And Meg, does that kind of chime with your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I think generally I wouldn't say it's a necessity. I have friends who didn't study design in university or foundation courses, and they followed a career in that way. I think the one thing that I did gain from university in terms of my course in graphic design is that you're able to be really open, and you're trying new things, and you're working on it gives you an opportunity to try all different sort of disciplines of design and work on briefs that are so free. Like Steph said, you kind of get given briefs that you really just push your creative mind. So if college or university is not something that you would do for starting a design career, I think the advice I would have is that you just make sure that you work on those briefs. You find the briefs online, or you can go and ask agencies or something, just to keep your creative mind going and be able to build up a portfolio of work, because that's the most important thing. I guess when we went to uni, you come out with a portfolio of 5 or 6 projects that you've worked on over 2 years or so, and that's what allows you to kind of go and start talking to people in the creative industry and get feedback on your work. So as long as you can get to a point where you've got some projects, even if they're made up, or you find some stuff online, I think that's the most important thing. Just pushing your creative mind and not just sort of doing, like Steph said, you could easily, if you go straight into experience or apprenticeships, you could quite easily just begin to do the kind of mundane, boring side of being a creative and lose that touch with your wild imagination. But yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And actually linked to that, there's a broader question around, do you advise people to go to university, or can you make it in the creative industry without a degree? We just, I suppose I'm going to input here, just I'm obviously further along in my career than the majority of the panel here, which we tried to put together a panel of people who are sort of closer to you in terms of your next steps. But certainly the industry's changed since I started out, when the majority of agencies had a requirement for a degree as a part of the requirements for the job. RY removed that requirement about 5 or 6 years ago now, and I think the majority of the creative industry is the same. So you definitely don't need a degree as a kind of point of entry into the industry. But often the thing that I found that university afforded me was the time to explore what it was that I wanted to do and kind of practice on stuff and give things a go, which is where you get quite a lot of opportunity at uni. But I don't think that that's the be all and be end all. But I'm going to pass over to people who are wiser than me to tell you their thoughts about it. So I think, given that we've got the breadth of roles, perhaps Karina, could you tell us a little bit around sort of consulting? Do you think that that's the same in consulting, or do you think that a degree is more useful?
That's a really interesting question. I think that university is, I don't know if it's essential. I'm not even sure if it's part of the job requirement in terms of the application. So I'm really sorry, because it wasn't something that I considered, having gone to university myself. But I would say that similar to you, going to university afforded me an opportunity to think about what I wanted to do and to gain a lot of knowledge around subject matters that I cared about. And unlike a design career, which, I've heard from Steph and Megan, where you can at least come with a portfolio showing that you've been independently driven, and you can show kind of what you like tangibly. Your portfolio can demonstrate your skill set and your creativity and your talent. I don't think there's something that's similar in terms of consulting. And so I would say that my guess is that a university degree is more important for that side of the business.
Thank you. Jess, you touched on this as well, kind of in terms of film. What do you think in terms of a degree? Would you recommend it? Do you think it's useful?
I think in terms of sort of the film team and how I came into it, so I started as a production assistant like Hayley. I don't think it's necessary at all. I think the most important things to get that role and be successful in that role is that you just have to be organized. You have to be good at like juggling lots of tasks at once, just having a natural kind of curiosity about the industry. I mean, I came into it not knowing anything about film production, which seems kind of weird. Like, it seems like that should be essential, but it's not. You just have to kind of, the best way to do that is pick things up as you go, like learn on the role. And I don't think university sort of really prepared me in any way for that. Like, that's just the best way for that role, I'm sure probably Hayley would agree, is just, you know, experiencing yourself, but coming to it just with an open mind and curiosity and willing to learn, and like wanting to figure things out maybe outside of work as well. So like doing your own kind of research around like how films are made and what makes a good film and things like that. I think that's more necessary than getting a degree.
Thank you. Hayley, do you agree?
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with Jess. So like I mentioned before, I managed to get into the team, sort of got my foot in the door in the company as a receptionist. So I didn't go to university, I don't have any degree of any form, but I've still managed to get a place in the team by proving that, again, like, you're passionate about it. You ask loads of questions, like no questions are stupid questions, just ask loads of questions, just keep working hard and prove to the other people in your team that you're willing to learn loads. And I've learned so much in my past year in this team, and it's been really interesting, and I've loved like every moment of it. And again, I don't have a degree, I came into the team with a very basic knowledge of film production as well, like Jess. So it just goes to show that you don't necessarily have to know what you want to do at the moment, or whether you want to go into a degree, like you'll find your way. Just keep pushing and keep like asking those questions, like I said. And yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Hayley. Bea, how about in more of the kind of project management sphere? How important do you think a degree is there?
I totally agree with what everyone has said so far. So I think I wouldn't have necessarily needed a degree. And I found that, especially during my first couple of internships, it was more about the soft skills. So kind of if you're willing to learn, if you are interested in the topic and kind of show a passion for the industry. I don't know, I used to watch just lots of ads and think about, oh, what's this brand doing here? How are they designing? Just look at the newspapers, check out those kind of things. And being able to demonstrate that, I think, was much more important than me having that degree. And yeah, so I think in short, it's not needed.
Thank you. And Kelly, just does that echo your experience, do you think?
I totally agree. I think from university I gained connections and networking opportunities, and that's one thing obviously I've taken away and I utilised for sure when I came out of uni to get my first job, which was actually at a post house. I did a bit of work experience for free in a London post house. So I was a runner for a couple of weeks, and then at the end of that they offered me a job as a receptionist. I sort of moved through the ranks there for a few years, but it's definitely sort of who you know. I think that's something you can definitely use to your advantage. And any opportunity that comes your way, just show that you're willing to get involved, that you're keen, you're interested and dedicated, and make sure that they want to work with you moving forward. Don't give anyone else the chance to jump on in there.
Thank you. So I've had another question through, which is around advice for applying for or finding internships. So can I just, I'm not 100% sure with the panel how many of us have done internships or not. Can you just give me a nod if you've done an internship? Okay, 4. So if we start with Bea, have you got any advice on how you go about finding or applying for internships?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think even though, you know, as a project manager, you don't necessarily need to be the most creative person. It's more about organizing and maybe people skills. But still, if you want to get the foot into the creative industry, it's nice to do something that stands out. So how I got my first internship is I stalked the person of the agency I really wanted to work for on LinkedIn. And I just messaged them and said, you know, I don't really want to be annoying to you, but would you have any advice for a young, motivated person who wants to get into this industry? And the person really replied. So my advice is don't kind of shy away from just reaching out to people you don't even know and contacting them. LinkedIn is a good place for that, and kind of just starting to get the conversation flowing. And even if it's just about not necessarily an internship, but just about a hint. And what that helped me do is I kind of produced a really simple film for this first internship. And by no means, I mean, I'm not a film professional. I didn't know necessarily how to use it, and I'm sure it looked really bad. But I think they saw that I made an effort to stand out and that I really wanted it. So that kind of made me stand out from the crowd, and this is how I got the job in the end. So that was really a good tip. I would say try and stand out if you can. And one other thing I always used to do is I looked up kind of events or free online sessions or webinars or whatever, you know, just Googling. And at the end of each session, I mean, for one, it's very valuable to just listen to experienced people and whatever life tips they might have for you and how they manage in this industry. But at the end, there is always a question session. So I was always trying to put my hand up and ask, you know, whatever came to my mind. And this helped me, you know, the panelists often remembered me because, you know, you're the one, often only a couple of questions, who actively participated in the conversation, and that will then later on might lead to a nice conversation starter. So don't be afraid to just get out there and ask, and yeah.
Thank you. Did I see also Steph and Jess and Meg obviously have all done internships as well. So Meg, perhaps could you just tell us, have you got any tips or how to find them or how to go about getting them?
Yeah, so I mean, I had quite a busy year of sourcing internships after uni. It wasn't the easiest year, but I mean, I sent hundreds and hundreds of emails. You just kind of, well, okay, I'll start at the beginning. So the first internship I found actually quite soon after graduating, well, finishing university, it was, I studied in Sheffield, and it was a local agency that I had found, and I just emailed them. Someone had given me this tip, so I'd emailed them and said, oh, I really like your work. I'm looking for some advice, or just like, it'd be really great if I can come and have a chat and get your feedback on my work as I start looking for internships. And so they sort of responded, and I went in and I had a chat with them and their senior designers, and they sat down with me and they went through my portfolio and they gave me some crit, which was really good. And then after that, they offered me an internship, and I ended up staying there, I think, for about a month or 2 months, and then I moved back down south, and that's when I struggled. I think being closer to London, it was almost like there's so many more opportunities, but there's so many more people going for those opportunities. So the advice I have there is just don't give up, just hammer it, just email these agencies. Like, I was finding the agencies that I love, I was emailing them, I was living at my parents and just getting the train up to London, like every single day, meeting people, just constantly asking for feedback on portfolios. And I think that was really the best way to do it, just like not giving up, because it can be quite hard. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's not the easiest time sometimes, but as long as you're consistent with it and you're adaptable, I think a lot of the time you can be quite precious about your work as a designer, and especially at that stage when you've put so much into it. But you know, if someone says to you, maybe you should try doing this, then do it. But you know, just keep adapting your portfolio and keep it fresh and keep trying to add new things to it. And eventually, if you want it that much, it will work.
Thank you. Jess, do you have any advice for people looking for an internship?
Yeah, I mean, sort of similar to what people have been saying. So I think it was sort of first year of uni, or maybe just before, I did an internship with a women's writing magazine. And I think just like, at that time, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So just finding companies that you are sort of interested in the field of work that they're in, or that you like the things that they do. I was following loads on social media just to check if they were like posting about, I don't know, job opportunities or internships. And this magazine just posted that they were doing a writing competition. And I knew that they were quite a small company. So I thought maybe like they would need help processing entries. So I just messaged them, you know, sending in an email. I think that's really good to just keep contacting people, like even if they're not posting out about or you're not aware of any kind of opportunities that they have going, just like continually messaging people. And then luckily they said they did need help. So just being able to work in that office environment, it was unpaid obviously, but and it was only for 3 weeks, but I just think that's such a like important thing to not only have in your CV that you're actively looking for stuff to try and like, you know, improve your knowledge and improve your experience, but just seeing what that kind of industry was like I had no insight before. So that was really valuable. But also in a previous job, when I was a receptionist, I sort of was in charge of kind of like reviewing applications for internships and jobs. And just in terms of being one of the people that sort of filters through the applications for internships, I'll just say like a couple of things that I think are really important if you're messaging people or sending your CV through or your portfolio, is like spelling mistakes are just a massive thing. Like it's just takes a second to just reread like your message or, you know, your CV, and just make sure that you're not making any spelling mistakes, because I think that's a massive thing that really turns people off against you, which just seems really unfair. But just like having that attention to detail. And then also don't make it super long. Like if you're messaging people, don't do like a whole, you know, page of this is why I love this industry. Just like keep it concise, but make sure that it's not like just a really standard message that could just be copy and pasted, and that you're copy and pasting to each person, because they can pick those up. So just make sure that you're like specifying it to each person that you're contacting as well. Like maybe mentioning one project that company's done that you really liked, so that they know that you've looked at them and like you're paying attention to who you're contacting. I think that's really important.
Thank you for that. And mindful of time, actually, Steph, can I ask you just quickly a slightly different question that's come through, which is rather than advice on internships, unless you think there's anything that hasn't been covered, one of the questions is a physical portfolio still important, or is it best to create a digital portfolio?
I think just to touch on that little comment before about the internships, I spent a lot of time with the team at RY going through our intern program and sorting through different applications we had for our internships. And one thing, I guess, to just echo what Jess said, is that we would get a lot, like I could be sat there on a day and have to go through 300 applications and kind of filter them into these will be great, these maybe aren't quite right. And I think the main thing that put people in that these maybe aren't quite right is that copy and paste type thing. We had, I think it is really important to not just pick every single agency out there and find one that really has a niche that you quite like. So for example, we did a project years and years ago, it was on cheese, and we had so many applications saying, I really liked this project that you did, but it was the first project that was on the page. And I think don't just do that. Don't just go on their page and find the first project, because you won't be the only one to do it. Find something that's really different and make yourself stand out. If that agency stood out to you, you need to make yourself stand out to them. But that would be the only thing that I would kind of echo what everyone else has said on that. But now to the actual question, is a physical portfolio still important, or best to create digital? I think depends where you're going. I think, remember, we're living in a digital world. Not everything has to be printed. You can easily adapt a digital portfolio much quicker. For example, you can kind of do what you would do a printed portfolio to look like, but put it on an iPad or a laptop or kind of that other form, just to make it easy for people to access. And another thing about doing that, it means every time you change it or adapt it to, like what Meg said, if someone said, oh, have you thought about doing this? You're not having to reprint it every single time, and that will save you a lot of time and a lot of money. But also remember, say you are taking on an iPad, that you could be in a room with 3 different people and address every single one of them people. So make sure you can pass it around, or make sure you don't just kind of put it in the middle so they can't see it. Or if you're going to do that, email it them beforehand. These people will be prepared to speak to you just as you'll be prepared to speak with them. But if you're going to, so what I do in terms is very print based. I would take my portfolio online, but if I've done something really nice that's printed, like at college or university, like a book, or you've met, and the kind of dedication has gone into that making process, take it with you. There's nothing better than having something tangible to hold and to like almost play with. And I think it will just, you can photograph something, but if the the art and the beauty of it is in the actual object. Just take it with you. Obviously, if it's huge and you can't carry it, then a photo is going to have to do. But if you can, I would take it. But don't print it off reels and reels and reels, because you spend a lot of money doing that.
Do you think that is that the same advice from you, Meg? Obviously, you're more in a digital role anyway. Do you think that there's merit in a physical portfolio, or do you think now digital is as strong or stronger?
Yeah, I would say from my experience, I remember spending a lot of money on printing something so lovely and beautiful, and then lugging this massive A3 box around London like for days and days. And you know, some people are like, oh, you should change this and change this, and it's like it just becomes a nightmare. So you can't keep on top of it, you can't keep it adaptable. It is lovely, but I don't think it's a necessity. And I think because the cost of printing, I mean, if I was to interview someone, I would totally appreciate if they didn't have a physical. It wouldn't affect, I don't think, at all your result or your kind of impression that you make. The one bit of advice I would have on interviewing interns last year was that think about, if you're not going to print it, that's absolutely fine, but maybe email it over beforehand and just mention, I'm really sorry, I don't have a printed copy. Can we view this on your, a screen or a laptop at your company? Because I did have one girl come with like a really small iPad, and it was a real shame because you just couldn't get that kind of, she was going through the portfolio, but it was really hard to see quite how, like, the work was amazing, but it didn't do it justice. I think, even if, just email it to someone beforehand. I mean, they probably have it anyway, but just give them a note, or, if you've got a laptop, bring a laptop. Just think about giving your work like the credit and the justice that it deserves, because that's the main thing from a design point of view. I think from being a digital designer, I think some people have websites, but again, from a cost point of view, that's the thing you have to manage as well. So at your stage of your careers at the beginning, I think if you bring it on a laptop and it's a PDF, then that's absolutely fine.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Karina, can I throw a slightly different question to you, which I think you're probably best placed to answer straight away, which is it best to try and work in an agency, or are there roots in commercial companies too? And I know that you're quite new to agency life, so you probably have a view on that. Yeah,
I think there's all sorts of companies you can work for. So I think by commercial companies, you're just thinking about for-profit companies. So that would be different. For instance, I'm working for the government or from working for charities. So it really depends on what you're interested in doing. For instance, I used to be a lawyer. Law firms are a commercial entity. So is Coca-Cola, which, it delivers a product that people drink. RY is a commercial company, and what we deliver is communications for a variety of different audiences. So I think there are several different routes, and it's really just a matter of what you're interested in and what kind of calls to you. And by the way, you can say one thing interests you at one point in time and work there, and then you could find yourself in a totally different role somewhere else. So it's okay for that to change too. I think it's a matter of, at this point, you can't apply to everything in the whole wide world. So you have to start thinking about, what might interest you and narrow it down that way. And then you'll figure it out as you go.
Thank you. Kelly, I saw you doing lots of nodding there. What's your view on, is agency, if you want to go into agency, you need to start there, or are there other routes then?
I think it totally depends really what you feel is right for you. I think agency is a much faster paced environment. But obviously you're not going to really get that until you're in the agency, and you're working with lots of different clients and lots of different projects. But if you were effectively maybe client side and working for a brand, then it may be that you're passionate about that brand, you love what they do, you love about their offer, and that would, in my eyes, be a little bit more of a slower paced environment. I actually did a bit of time working in recruitment as well, and I found that people that started in agency could transition a little bit better to client side, but client side to agency a little bit trickier.
Thank you. Bea, I saw you nodding along as well. Did you have a thought about that?
I was just kind of thinking about my own experience, because my first ever internship was at a company, and it was just focused around one product or one brand that we were selling, and I found myself getting bored very quickly. So I chose the agency route because I really love working with different clients, different projects, and that no day is ever the same. So, you know, if you feel like you're up for this kind of environment, then definitely an agency is for you. But touching upon a little bit of another question, what the worst part might be is that it's also at the same time very stressful, and sometimes it can be challenging. And, you know, not to sugarcoat it, but there might be longer working hours at some times, because, you know, clients have their own deadlines and we're ultimately responsible for delivering to those. And, you know, for a normal office job, you might be able to clock off at 5 easily all the time, whereas sometimes in agencies that's not the case. So it really depends what you want and enjoy doing.
Thank you. And I was thinking, given the amount of time we've got, I'll probably come to that, you know, what's everyone's best and worst thing about their job. We'll probably do a quick fire go on that kind of towards the end. But there's one other question that's come through, which is about, do we have any advice in terms of the best GCSE or A-level subjects to do to give you a base for all sorts of routes into the industry? It's so long ago that I did GCSE and A-levels that I don't feel like I'm particularly well equipped to comment, other than I think that my advice would be do subjects that you enjoy and subjects that you're going to get good grades in. Like, I don't think that, you know, so for example, in our team, we have animators as well as producers. And, you know, producing is actually about people and understanding how to tell stories. Whereas in animation, actually physics plays a not small part of it in terms of understanding how things move and the mechanics of objects. So I think, you know, it could be anything, but I'm going to defer to the panel who are probably have a bit more recent experience in it. I'm trying to think who to go to first, who hasn't spoken for a while. Hayley, I don't think you've spoken for a while. Have you got any thoughts on whether there's specific subjects people should take?
Again, I agree with you that it very much just do what you enjoy. When it comes to your A-levels, I know, for example, I did PE and I really enjoyed it and came out with a really good grade, but then I also did history, hated it, and came out with a rubbish grade. So it, like, do what you enjoy, because your last years at school, just make the most of it, like work hard, and if you enjoy the subject, you're much more likely to do better in it than something that you don't enjoy. Obviously, if you know that there's something that you want to focus your career on already, then go for it. Like, if you want to do medicine, then obviously you're going to have to do biology and like physics and stuff. But again, if it's something that you enjoy, then definitely go for it and push that.
Brilliant, thank you. Karina, obviously slightly different education system in the States, but, you know, what do you think about? Are there specific subjects that would be useful or more or less useful?
I totally agree with what both of you have said. Do what you'd enjoy and do what you think you'd excel at, and sometimes those are the same thing. Oftentimes they are. I can't remember what I took at that age. I don't think it's as consequential as, you know, proving that you can do well in school, which is the grade point, and then enjoying it. So I totally agree.
Great, thank you. And Meg, is that the same? Is it the same true of design, or do you think an art qualification is important?
I don't know. I think I was quite lucky. I think when I was in maybe year 9, I definitely found a calling for what I wanted to do. But it was off the back of kind of doing DT, and then we did like one module in DT where we got to create a movie poster, and I was like, I'm good at this. This was like one of the first things I thought, yeah, I'm actually good at this. And I kind of, you know, I loved it, and it worked like exactly what these guys have said. You know, I think because I loved it, I invested a lot of time in it. Generally, I am much more of a creative person and not so good at exams and things. So when it came to my A-levels, I just avoided any subjects that was exam based. I think I did media, business, which was a BTEC, graphic design and photography. So I chose things that I knew I was going to be capable of doing and enjoy and succeed, and I did well through those. So it's exactly the same advice. I think if you're going to go to university and study graphic design, I think the course that I applied to, I think you did have to have one subject that was creative, whether it was art or graphics or, you know, product design or photography. And as long as you had one creative subject that you had done in either your GCSE or your A levels, then it was enough to get you onto a degree. If not, I think usually they recommend that you could do a foundation course. If you haven't, I did have friends that through GCSE and A levels they hadn't done any creative subjects, and then they realised that was something that they really wanted to do for a career. And on applying to university first time round, the universities would just say, go and spend a year doing a foundation course in art and design or graphic design, and then you can come back and you can apply. So there's definitely routes around it if it's not something you've taken.
Great, thank you. And Kelly, do you have the same view or different view to everyone else?
I think when I was at school, I knew what I was quite good at, so I sort of elected for those subjects. But also, I picked IT because I quite liked doing that, and I knew I was quite good, so that kind of mixed well. But then going to college, I had, I guess, the same approach, but I think you have to do things that you're going to enjoy, otherwise, and that you probably see yourself doing in the future, otherwise it seems a bit pointless. But what I would say is that it's not the be all and end all that you pick when you're sort of in your last years of school for your GCSE and your A level, because sometimes you don't always know what you're going to want to do in your career. I mean, I certainly didn't know. I was toying with different sort of things, journalism. I wanted to be a presenter at one point. I wanted to be a producer. So it just all depends really, I think, what paths you go on in your life and where things take you. So just, I guess, pick things you enjoy, things that you'll be good at, because of course you want to get the best grade you can.
Thank you. Right, and mindful of the fact we've only got a few minutes left and there's quite a few of us, we've got a minute each on what are our favourite and worst parts of our jobs. So if we'll do a minute each. Steph, I'll start with you. What's the thing you most enjoy and what's the worst bit about your job?
What do I most enjoy? If I was saying RY, it's the people, without a doubt. I think if you can find an agency or a place of work, even if it's not in a creative industry, and you like the people and they make every day going to work enjoyable, then I don't think you can go wrong, really. And then if you like the job you're doing, obviously that helps. But the people is definitely my favourite thing. And the fact that I get to be creative and do what I know that I can do. The worst thing is probably touches on what Bea said before, being in agency life, you can have some very tight deadlines. For example, I'm working on a pitch at the moment. We've not got very long to do it, and that's when you put kind of the most amount of work you'll ever do is into a pitch, and you've got about 3 days, which sounds very scary. So the nights can be a little bit long, but then it's work hard, play hard. If you can do that, then you might get a little bit of downtime over the next few days, and you enjoy it, then win-win, really.
Thank you. And Bea, what's your favourite and worst bits of your job?
I think I gave that away a little bit already. So the worst bit definitely is kind of the stressful environment sometimes, but for me the positive outweighs that by far. So it's really exciting to work on so many different clients and projects, and also people, you know, in the agency every project is different and you'll work with different kind of project teams. And I mean, I know we're not like doctors or saving lives or anything, but still it is such a rewarding feeling when you go out there and you see kind of the work, the campaign you've been doing, the film you've developed, and kind of, you know, we can make a difference in people's lives as well if you think about how much brands influence our daily lives. So I think at the end of the day it's really exciting.
Thank you. Hayley, what's your favourite and worst bit?
The favourite part, I guess, is as an assistant, I sort of dip into lots of different projects. So always having something new to do is really exciting. And I've had the opportunity to go on some really cool shoots over the past year. So I've been to Wales to do like a TV commercial, which was really cool. The worst part, I guess I agree with the other guys, like quite often the timelines and the deadlines for us to produce these films is quite tight. So it can get a bit stressful in trying to organise things. But it always works out in the end. So yeah, not ever that negative.
Thank you. Kelly, same for you, best and worst.
I love working with all the different people and personalities. I think that's fantastic. The thing I dislike the most is probably the constant changing goalposts and timelines, and I guess it can be a bit frustrating when the client wants something for Friday, but then it's then Wednesday. So you have to be quite resilient and flexible to deal with things like that.
Thank you. Karina.
So I think I like that I'm always learning something new. Every client has a different issue that you're trying to help them tackle. They're from a different industry. So I'm learning so much about the world. And I think that that's a really enriching experience. But relatedly, it can be very challenging because you're always stretching. You're always learning something new, which means you didn't know it before. So you might have to battle, self-confidence issues, or do enough research to really understand what you're working with, or even test things. And that can be a bit scary, but overall, I would say it's a good thing because it involves a lot of growth.
Thank you. Meg, what's your favourite thing?
I'm going to sound like a proper website nerd, but I do just love designing websites. I love the kind of, when you get clients come to you, and a lot of our clients are very corporate, and it's kind of, their websites haven't been touched in like 30 years, probably since the web was invented. And it's just amazing when you can you have the freedom to think about how you can bring their brand to life, and just like the organizational element of just like simplifying these like horrendous platforms. And so I guess the negative side of this, and the only thing I kind of don't like about my job is when you create all these beautiful, lovely concepts and they go with like the worst one, and then they make you bring it down and down and down and down until you're designing something that, you still have a passion for it because it's a vast improvement on what they have, but it wasn't the beautiful idea which you had envisioned for them a couple of months ago.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jess, what do you enjoy most about your job?
I think what's quite good about our job, so even though like probably 80% of it is quite admin focused, we're still involved in like the creative aspect of the team. So when you get to, even though the process can be super stressful and very long, but like seeing the film or the animation that you make at the end that that you've contributed to is just really exciting. And also like you can find ways in your job to be able to make like creative decisions along the way, even if you're not like the main producer on the project, which is always really, really satisfying to be involved with.
Fab. And I think to echo Jess's point, I suppose having been in making films for longer than I care to remember, my favourite thing is the fact that we're constantly delivering something in the end, and I find that kind of, I realised quite early on in my career that it turns out I have a low boredom threshold, so to be constantly finishing things and being able to move on to the next thing was something that kind of worked really well for me. So that's the thing I love the most, and of course I don't dislike anything about my job. Except it can sometimes be just a teeny bit stressful. I think with 1 minute to go, that's probably it. So I guess it's just remains to say thank you very much for you all for turning up and joining us here and for your questions. And hopefully you've found something useful from what we've been talking about. So it's been a real pleasure to spend this time with you. Thanks very much. Bye.